I've decided to review some sequences from Harold Hoyt's 1925 film The Lost World, which stars Lloyd Hughes and Bessie Love as adventurers who travel the vast expanses of the South American unknown on a human interest mission to rescue the fictional Professor Maple White. Being that I work in the field of vertebrate paleontology, I think it's important to reflect on a great work of the past like Hoyt's in order to properly assess the strides we've taken since it was produced. Whether or not you become a fan of this film after listening to my smarmy voice draw on for 10 minutes or so, it's definitely true that without the work of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Harold Hoyt, respectively, I'd probably be out of a job, and that wouldn't be cool. Here we see one of the film's main characters, Edward E. Malone, who is played by Lloyd Hughes, accordingly called one with the brain of a child and the body of an athlete. He's greeting Sir John Roxton, a great hunter played by Lewis Stone. Stylistically, the shot is beautiful, with a little ounce of sepia tone and just the right balance of activity between the foreground and periphery. The two men are dwarfed by a large cast of Diplodocus, which graces the hall of their fictional zoological museum in London. The film's premise is that the backcountry of the Amazon contains over 50,000 miles of unexplored waterways, and really none of us can be sure what lies beyond that landmass, which, according to the film's intertitles, is greater than Europe. Here we see a painting by Charles R. Knight, my favorite artist, whose reconstructions were used to design the stop-motion dinosaurs in Hoyt's film. I'll use some images of his early paintings throughout the review, and I have the rights to do so. At the time, this was a legitimate inquiry, which even today contributes to the realism inherent in the film's conception and design. This is Professor Challenger, played by Wallace Beery. I liken his character as a noxious mix between Alexander Chistiakov's father character in Podovkin's Soviet-era silent film Mother, and any criminal noir character personified by Orson Welles. Here we see Yistikov's character with a foreboding facial gesture that mimics Beery's expressionist style of acting. This is followed by a close-up shot of Maple White's Allosaurus drawing, juxtaposed with Charles R. Knight's 1904 restoration, in an excerpt from his lost journal, the carnivorous beast that is to become the film's primary antagonist. Here is a cinematographically pleasing element of foreshadowing. A report composed by Malone, this shadows his doubt of beasts living on the island, but leaves room open for interpretation. Compared to other silent films of this generation that I've seen, such as Chaplin's Circus, Hoyt's film is pretty heavy on dialogue in the intertitles, which includes insertion of literature beyond what's standard for films of the time. The first creature to be seen in this film is the Ape Man, a stoic figure that's reminiscent of 12th century imperial Chinese art. The shot's bold, dark, and simple. You can see that the backlighting produces a small silver lining around the ape's figure to give him a false air of power. The first true prehistoric beast we'll encounter is this large pterodactyl, which I liken to the larger Central American form Quetzalcoatlus, pardon my geekitude, which gives the film a slight ounce of scientific accuracy. While the stop-motion animation itself isn't easily believable, there is definitely a slender aura of realism in the shot. One of the most remarkable cinematic elements of The Lost World is the sunrise sequence, which, remarkably, was produced artificially in Hoyt's studio. I'll also include these very realistic shots of erupting volcanoes, slightly low-angle illusionary long shots that are something we'd expect to see in a late Cretaceous landscape, in lieu of the Deccan Traps eruptions which hasten the Mesozoic extinction. My interpretation of this is that Hoyt, probably at the urging of some preeminent geologist, may have jokingly factored this event into the film after the volcano erupts, and we see the dinosaurs running for their lives in a pretty hilarious fashion. Here we can see our antagonist of sorts, an Allosaurus, squaring off with a Triceratops. Anyone who knows me well understands that I've had a particular affinity for ceratops and dinosaurs over the past couple of years, so I had to stop and take this still for my own amusement. While Hoyt did his best to make the stop-action claymation as fluid as possible, I still laughed at this. Technically, it's a close-up shot indoors, which seeks to mimic a long shot being filmed at eye level in an outdoor setting. Here we see a shot of our adventurers encountering the allosaur in a grassy thicket. This sequence was reproduced in Steven Spielberg's film of the same name, with the Tyrannosaur instead acting as the movie's prime adversary. Naturally, there's nothing scientifically accurate about the animal's depiction throughout the movie. The stop-motion dinosaurs Hoyt used were inspired by early artwork by my favorite artist, Charles R. Knight. Most of Knight's paintings now reside at the Field Museum in Chicago. Over the past 5 years, I've had many opportunities to examine Knight's work thoroughly. He relied on preliminary studies conducted by the famous Barnum Brown, more of an explorer and less of a scientist, who reconstructed the animals with their caudal vertebrae resting against the ground, pubic bone jutting out, juxtaposed with an ilium shifted to a near vertical apogee in respect to the ground. Geekiness aside, and I apologize for that, many of these sequences make me laugh more than I can treat Hoyt's film with respect. One of the most powerful images in the movie is this high-angle shot of Maple White's body, who was previously expected to have eluded death in light of his expertise. Another stylistically powerful element is this medium shot of Malone and his fiancée, Paula White, who is played by Bessie Love. Malone's character is often called the first true Indiana Jones. Although the film is silent, he definitely projects a personality of guts and glory which seems to attract every woman within a 100-mile radius. I'll end with this brilliant high-angle shot of a pedestrian in London, soon after the caged brontosaurus is set loose on the city. We can see the animal's foot as it prepares to step on the gun-wielding man, as he does his best to shield his significant other from the horror. The shadows in this sequence come in stark contrast to the backlight of the city streets, and the darkness of the sky above where the long-necked beast looms about.